Oh, hey, buddy, it's your old pal Scott, and this is Let's Talk Tabletop. Today, I want to discuss something that's always been puzzling to me, and it's a mistake that Games Workshop and other games, but specifically, I'm most familiar with Games Workshop. So, Games Workshop does this an awful lot. And I've got several examples, and they're just from random codexes or battle tomes that I've taken. So it's nothing like I'm not nitpicking a certain army, and many of these are from previous editions, but they're just good examples of the same routine mistake made book after book and edition after edition from Games Workshop. Let's dive in. So in game design, they often use points as a crutch. This unit is more powerful, therefore it costs more points in your list, et cetera, right? This one's weaker, it costs less points, less damage output, less durability, less access to magic, just whatever. For whatever reason, they think that they can balance things with points. And in theory, you can balance things with points if you have a real granular point system like Warhammer and other games do. The problem comes is when you get things for free and there's multiple options for free, but they're not all made the same. Like they're not all made equally. And that's when you really run into issues. Essentially, your enhancements back in the day, your warlord traits and things like that. Now I understand enhancements now have point values, and that makes so much more sense because now you don't have to make them all the same in power level, right, or usefulness, and you can charge different points for them. That was 100% the right way to go. And to be honest with you, I always felt that's the way spells should be. Magic should be that way in Age of Sigmar and in 40k before 10th edition just made them shooting attacks, essentially. But I always thought spells should not be free because all of the spells are not created equally. Therefore, there's a few things that are gonna rise to the top. Like for instance, in the Sylvaneth book, the 3.0 Sylvaneth book. So you have three different command traits, right? And they all are the same point cost. So you don't really have to worry about, oh, this one's more expensive or whatever. But let's take a look at these and see if they're actually of equal value. I'm not saying that any of them are garbage. I'm not saying that you can't still build a list around all three of these. I'm not saying that all three of these don't have a usefulness. But what I am saying is it seems to me like you will get way more usefulness out of some of these more than others. The Gnarled Warrior just ignores positive and negative modifiers to the general's save. Now, ignoring negative modifiers is great. Ignoring positive modifiers, so I don't even get cover? Like, that kind of sucks, right? That's a very middle of the road sort of thing. So, okay, I guess I don't get cover anymore, but you also can't rend me at all. So, I guess that's a net positive, right? Because you could be giving up a +1, but you're ultimately maybe ignoring a -2 or -3 or something like that. So, okay, I guess that's all right. So the Lord of Spites subtracts an attack from the enemies that finish a pile-in move within 3 inches of the general for that combat phase. In other words, if they don't make a pile-in move later on, then they don't get -1 to their attack. That's very situational. I mean, -1 attack is always a good ability, but it's pretty situational only when they make a pile-in move, and if they didn't pile in, that sort of thing. It's kind of interesting. Also within 6 inches, so it's very small aura. So that also has very mixed effects or usefulness. So now get this one: the War Singer. If your units are wholly within 12 inches of the general, they just get +3 to their movement. To me, that's a no-brainer. Now, obviously, it's not ignoring negative modifiers. Obviously, it's not reducing attacks of enemies. But if you have any units that you want to move quickly, adding 3 straight inches to them, and it could be multiple units. You could easily fit probably 4 units bubble wrapping the general with the general himself. And adding 3 inches to their movement is not bad. Like a 9-inch movement for an infantry and things like that, not bad at all. So to me, as far as general usefulness, I feel like the third option is the most useful. Obviously, it doesn't do the same things as the first two, but it's generally just better, I think. Now, if that's not what you're going for, I get it. There's going to probably be comments in the comment section saying, "Oh, I'd go for number one," and that's totally fine. But what I'm saying is when they don't give points to this, they notoriously do not make them of the same power level. And then it's a problem, right? Now let's move on to the spell lores. Now, they do have quite a few good spells in the 3rd edition Sylvaneth book. A lot of healing yourself each phase until your next hero phase. A lot of healing other people, D6 wounds, that sort of thing. So they do have some good spells, but here's 2 spells right here that I feel like one is just far superior. The Dwellers Below has a casting value of 7 and a range of 12, and you roll a dice for every model in the target unit, and on a 5-up they take a mortal wound. That's really not bad. That's really not bad, especially if you're rolling hot. Now, obviously, it may not have any effect whatsoever, so it's not quite super reliable, but if you're hitting a block of 20 dudes, 5-ups on mortals is not bad at all. And the range, a lot of casters, not all casters, a lot of casters want to stay out of melee range. They want to keep the enemy away from them. So having a 12-inch range is pretty good, right? You can bubble wrap them or whatever. But the Deadly Harvest has a casting value of 6, and all enemy units within 3 inches, essentially within engagement range of this wizard, take D3 mortals. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, so you say every unit within 3 inches. Cool, right? Casting value is a little less. It's a 6 instead of a 7. Okay. But the range is 3 inches, so you already have to be in combat with that person, right? And then it's D3 mortals. So it very likely could just be 1 mortal. And it's for every enemy unit. Well, how many are you in combat with? I mean, likely just 1, maybe 2. There's no way you're in combat with 5 units. There's just no way. It's not happening with the caster. So to me, even though the casting value is 1 less and it's a guaranteed 1 wound, it's not created equal. You're in melee, which many wizards don't want to be in melee, right? With a bunch of people. And you get better efficiency out of it when you're in melee with multiple units. That is a wizard's worst nightmare in many cases. Versus the other one where you can try your luck with the 5-ups, right? You can roll up to 20 dice, in maybe more in some cases, and you're at range. You can have a barrier in between you. So to me, right there, they both cost the same because they're free. But to me, one seems way more useful than the other. Now, I'm not saying the 3-inch one doesn't have any value or anything like that. I'm just saying that they often do this sort of thing where it doesn't make sense. They're not of equal value. Now if they said every enemy unit within 6 inches, okay, now we're talking. Because you really could plop them down, still bubble wrap them, and you could hit multiple people. Okay. But the 3 inches is pretty limiting, and D3 Mortals is fine. The next thing I'd like to take a look at is the Cities of Sigmar 1.0 book. Now, obviously, there's new books out. Obviously, things have changed with 4.0, but let's take a look at some of the... I just picked literally a random city. So this is Hammerhal. Let's look at the Hammerhal command traits, shall we? So the first one is you get an extra melee attack for one of your general's weapons. Okay, that's not so bad. And at the beginning of the game, you get an extra command point. Alright, that's alright, I guess. The second one is all units within 12 inches of the general, wholly within 12, reroll 1s to wound. You get a bunch of great swords, you get a bunch of demigryph knights, back when they still existed. You get a bunch of melee units with rolling with your general, and they're rerolling 1s to wound. That's not bad at all, and you could affect multiple units with that. You could affect at least 2 units with it, Now, you're not likely to affect 3, but you could. And it's wholly within 12, but wholly within 12 is not bad range for that. Then the next one is adding 1 to the hit rolls of all friendly units wholly within 12 inches when the general made a charge move. That's also not bad. You're making your 4s into 3s, your 3s into 2s. I mean, I actually don't know which one is statistically better, getting a +1 or a re-roll of 1s to wound. I guess it would depend on what the unit is you're putting it on. But both of those, I think, are on par with each other. Now, of course, one is just always the re-roll 1s to wound is always, no matter what he does. So I understand that's probably slightly better than the third one. Third one is only when the general charges. Okay, but it's +1 to hit. That's good. That's not a reroll. That's a straight up 17% better for those units. Once again, buffing 2 units, whatever. That's not bad at all. You just got to make sure your general fits in there, right? But the first one now, Now that we've read all three of them, the first one is like an extra melee attack for one of his weapons, and you get an extra command point. I mean, meh. I don't really think, I really don't think that that's that great. You know what I mean? Now, obviously, those two buff things, but when you're talking about a game with synergies and multipliers, right? If I get reroll ones to hit on one attack, or I get reroll ones to hit on 100 attacks, clearly there's a difference there, right? Clearly, one of them is benefited over the other. So when you give effects on units, the bigger the unit or the more attacks they get or whatever, the more chances you get to affect that roll, you're obviously going to get more value out of it. So anything that just buffs the general slightly, like an extra attack, is like, okay. I mean, if you really want to try to make them a beat stick, although one extra attack's not going to do a whole lot. But if you can buff other units, you're getting way more multiplier effect out of that. And that's another example of how games, a lot of times, they should put points on these things. Because then, at least if you decide narratively or creatively, you decide to take the lesser of the options, you're also paying lesser points. Like, and that actually makes sense, right? Make one of them 5 points and the other two 10. Or whatever. Make the second one 12 and the third one 10. What, it really doesn't matter. The point is that if you're going to give them all the same cost, even though it's 0, you got to make them at least on par with each other. With my game, Brutality, and Mass Brutality is out. With my games, all my stuff is the same cost, like all of the upgrades and things like that. So like Cavalry or Saboteur or Pistolier or any of those. So what I have to do is try very hard to make sure they're balanced, if not in their stats, then in their abilities and their usefulness on the field. Now, obviously, I'm going about the hard way, right? Because all my upgrades are 1.5. But Games Workshop doesn't do that. They've got very granular points, and their points are so granular that they actually could make one of these 1 point. They could make one of these 3 points. They could do whatever they want because they're very granular. I go about it the hard way, but I enjoy the way I do it, so it's a little different. But my point is that I made all of mine the same cost, right? But they're equally powerful in different ways. Some cap objectives well, some kill well, some are more durable, whatever. Well, they did essentially the same thing. They gave you 3 different options, and they're the same cost, but they're not the same effectiveness. And it's crazy to me. It was always a funny thing over the ages. Me and my friends have always made fun of it. That it's like, oh, here's your 3 options. Well, one of them's just better. Typically, even if one of them's not always better, there's always a clear loser. Like almost always out of the 3 options or the 6 options if you're talking about spell wars or whatever, there's always one of them that just nobody ever takes. Yes, you could build a list around it. Yes, you could make it work, but there's other ones that are so much easier to make work. Then why would you even bother with that? You know what I mean? And maybe they fit into a real specific list or theme or something like that. And trust me, I'm all for taking the lesser options, right? Because, oh, it's narrative. My guy does this or my guy does that. And I get that, and that's the way I play. But I know most people are objectively going to look at these and go, well, these aren't created equal, but they're the same cost, so I'm going to take whatever's best or most efficient, or I can exploit the most. And that's basically just gamers. Gamers are going to do that regardless. And the funny thing is they've never added points to this stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, you really should. So, do you have any examples that you'd like to discuss about things that you've seen in games that definitely should be delineated with different types of points because their values and efficiency is way less? Let me know in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, and comment if you feel like it. Thank you to all my beautiful, sexy, good-smelling Patreon patrons. Look right there. You see Juicy Jim? Juicy Jim is not nearly as juicy as he claims, but he's still a good guy. He's been with me for years and years as well. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching the show, and today is also brought to you by Mass Brutality. Model agnostic, use whatever models you want. If you want to do rank and flank, you want to do guerrilla style, you want to roll d10s, you want to roll d6s, it's got it all. You create the units the way you want to see them played. Oh, and do fantasy versus sci-fi, all you want. Anyway, that's enough out of me. I'll see you next week.